Let's turn to the Middle East because the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is having talks with Israeli and Palestinian officials to try to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas says it has given its response to a framework proposal. Israel and the United States are said to be reviewing it. The Gaza Health Ministry announced earlier that a further 125 people have been killed in the last 24 hours, taking the overall total to just under 28,000. It is 4 months since the attacks on Israel by Hamas, in which 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 were taken hostage. Well, let's talk live now on the programme to Dan Arbel, who is the former Deputy Chief of Mission at the Israeli Embassy in Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. What do you believe are the biggest obstacles still to be overcome before we get to any ceasefire hostage deal?
So there is a proposal on the table, a hostage deal, a hostage return, and Israel in return needs to stop the fighting for a certain period of time and also release Palestinian prisoners of Hamas that are held in Israel. And it seems that Hamas's demands are very, very high and are tough, and Israel has to review them and see if it can actually meet them. So I think that Secretary of State Blinken is there in the region for the 5th time now to try and see where the parties are at and to try to allay to Israel the U.S. Position that it wants Israel to move forward on a deal and to be flexible.
Behind the scenes, because we're seeing what is happening in front of the cameras on the screen as you talk to us, but how frustrated do you think the Americans are with Benjamin Netanyahu, also his national security minister? Only a couple of days ago, he was taking swipes at Joe Biden, saying he hadn't backed Israel, was busying himself, I think that was the phrase, with sending in humanitarian aid to Gaza. How frustrating will that be for the US administration?
The U.S. administration is clearly very frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu and some of his cabinet ministers, and they're not hiding it. I think that, but yet they're focused on trying to broker a deal in which you'll have, first of all, an end to the fighting and hostage return, and as a second stage to try and begin and rebuild, reconstruct Gaza, and transfer the authority over Gaza to a Palestinian technocratic body that will govern day-to-day affairs with the support of the Arab world. Clearly, there's lots of tension between Washington and Jerusalem as we speak, and I think that Secretary Blinken is going to address those issues, convey U.S. concerns, and try to leverage U.S. influence over Israel to to change its approach.
Just a brief answer on this question, because the Israeli Prime Minister has always said getting the hostages out is his priority. Do you think that is true in reality?
First of all, Netanyahu is certainly focused on his political survival more than anything and the stability of his own coalition. He says that he wants the hostages out, but he clearly prioritizes the fight in Gaza first and then hostages. He believes that in order to secure the release of the hostages, Israel must continue fighting. There are others in Israel that oppose that view. Right now, many people in Israel are feeling that he's not doing all that can be done in order to seek the release of the hostages, unfortunately.
A final question, and we're going to put onto the screen pictures coming into us from Ramallah, because Palestinian protests at the planned meeting between Antony Blinken and Palestinian leaders. But as that is going on, Antony Blinken has been talking about the wider, longer-term push to 2 states living side by side peacefully. Do you think that sort of longer-term objective, does that only come in a post-Netanyahu world?
I believe so. I believe that Netanyahu's coalition at the moment will not agree to any movement towards a 2-state solution. And I think that only in a post-Netanyahu era you'll have the ability to return to some process in which at the end of that process you'll have 2 states living side by side with a independent Palestinian and sovereign state. So the U.S. is trying to keep it on the back burner and to make sure that it doesn't go away. But in the near term, I don't see any way of implementing that as long as Netanyahu is in power. Dan Arbel, great to talk to you live there from Washington. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Just a postscript, as I always do.